Hello, everyone, and welcome to our Spotlight webinar. It's great to have you all you here with us. I'm Dincer, Ozturan, the founder of Projera, a consulting firm established in Istanbul in 2008. We are helping companies making agile transformations and lean transformations for 17 years. We are going to dive into a topic that would be very interesting for all of us, I'm sure. Our headline is The Future of Scrum in an Age of Uncertainty, AI and Agile Fatigue. We are all tired of Agile, listening to Agile, but we will see and listen from a very, very different perspective. Today, we have all seen the headlines and blog posts. Some say Agile is dead, others are exhausted from years of Agile transformation, which did not deliver on their promise, actually. But in a world full of change, every day this change is speed up, and the core principles of Agile, I mean empowerment, continuous improvement, and focus on what works, are more important than ever. Our speaker, Dave West, CEO of Scrum.org, is here to show us what is next. He will share, I need to read here, how organizations can navigate this new landscape, how artificial intelligence will change the way we work, and why product thinking is shaping the future of Scrum. Actually, much of the emphasis will be on future of Scrum. Get ready to challenge what you think you know about Agile today. Please join me giving a warm welcome to Dave West. Yes, Dave, welcome, and thank you very much for joining us today.
Thanks, Dincer. Thanks, everybody, and thank you for taking the time. I know it's very late for many of you, so I apologize for getting in the way of your evening. Hopefully you've got a beverage of choice, maybe a nice cup of tea in Turkey, and you're enjoying that whilst listening to me, or maybe you've got trouble sleeping and I'm helping you go to sleep. I'm going to share some slides. Hopefully you can see them, and use that really to help us talk about the future of Scrum. It's a huge topic, so I have lots of slides. Some of them I'm going to go quite quickly over, but after the event, you'll be able to have access to this deck if it's of any use. And of course, you can always find me on LinkedIn to say, "Oi, Dave, I don't believe you," or "You said something I don't quite understand." I love talking about this, perhaps too much. I apologize, I might bore you. Certainly at parties, I have been known to do that. But let's talk about the future of Scrum. So I run an organization called Scrum.org, which is an international organization that's mission is to help people and teams solve complex problems. It was founded by the co-creator of Scrum, Ken Schwaber. I'm his CEO. He's chairman of the board. Ken is pretty much retired now, though. Like any good agile change agent, he sort of like appears in the middle of nowhere and says, "What about this?" and causes all sorts of trouble. So he's still involved, though less so than when he was running the organization. October the 1st, I'll have been here as CEO 10 years, which is an amazing time. And we've certainly seen a change around Scrum and agility during that 10 years. Ken's mission isn't about Scrum. I mean, it is, because he believes it's the most effective tool for helping people, teams, and organizations effectively work in a more agile way. But ultimately, it's about helping people and teams solve complex problems. And we do that training, certification, and ongoing learning. You know PSM1, I'm sure. Hopefully, you've taken it and passed it. All right, so let's set the scene. 2020, COVID was rampant. Everybody was working at home for the first time and dealing with teaching their children over Zoom and dealing with online delivery of vegetables and alcohol and coffee, which is took us a while to get a handle on it, but we certainly did. Well, Davos, which is the World Economic Forum, was run in 2020 earlier in the year, and they said a key idea. They actually said that Agile will become the most dominant way of organizing, and agility is the future. 2020, they said that. And Scrum Master, Agile coach, product owner were all in this sort of like important careers to watch. 2023, everything started to change, and it certainly has continued into 2025. Obviously, at the end of 2023, we saw the big announcement, Capital One were laying off all of their Agile coaches, and that was documented in 2024, and you can see in that article. Job families were being got rid of, and the world was changing. So in 2020, everything seemed like we were going to change the way we were working for the future. I was incredibly optimistic that organizations that I've observed to be really poorly organized and really not necessarily aligned to delivering value and responding to the environment around them, servicing their customers in an effective way, were going to change. I had this dream that organizations were going to slowly, incrementally, which is a very agile way, become more agile and more adaptive. And not only would that deliver more value for customers, which is ultimately what we're all paid for, right? But and stakeholders, it also will make it a more humane and more enjoyable place to work. Come 2023, that idea was kind of not happening. So why is that? So the economic reality since 2023, the economics started changing, and we saw at the end of 2023 that Donald Trump won the election, and life 2024, sorry, he was coming along and he won the election in 24, and the world was changing, right? There was a level of uncertainty. Tariffs definitely have created a level of financial instability around the world. Nobody kind of knows what's happening. Donald Trump's currently in the UK visiting my old families, probably not my family, but the Queen and the King, sorry, and the Queen, and the like today. So maybe we've got a bit of stability today, though the Fed's just announcing the interest rates, so that's sort of going to create some chaos. So there's an economic situation that definitely has pressed many organizations to stop spending, and because of that, when you're trying to reduce costs and stopping spending, Agile, something you don't really understand, is a great thing to stop spending on. When the change hasn't really become a natural part of the organization yet, it's awesome to stop spending on that. Consulting firms, particularly in 2025, they have over the last 5 years, and maybe before, have done a lot of agile transformations, McKinsey, Accenture, BCG. And we all know the cycle. They invent something, they then sell it to their 20% of their customers, give 80% of their revenue, they sell it to those people, they execute on that statement of work over 3 to 5 years, and then they've got to find something new. That's not an insult to anybody. It's just that is just the reality. And maybe some of the challenges to scaling, which is less about agile and more about organizational change, are really hard to scale these things. It takes an inordinate amount of time and requires some level of sponsorship. The other thing that was interesting is that the agile bubble, the business bubble, everyone had learned Scrum by this point. 1.5 million certified just by us, over 2 million people trained, thousands of books, online resources, Udemy, and that was changing the business model around Agile, which is then influencing the companies, changing the market, and making it much harder. I'm sure you've all got reasons that you're in the back of your mind why that bubble burst and what the environment is in 2025. Well, in 2025 in particular, particularly over the last year, AI has become the thing that everybody talks about. And I know if you go to a party, go to a dinner party, AI is bound to come up. Somebody will mention something about ChatGPT and how they used it to help their life to be more effective. A friend of mine uses it extensively to build schedules around training for his football team. So it's brilliant, you know, it's ever so good. It's incredible. It really has helped him do a very slow process. And a friend of mine's using it to do his fantasy American football draft. You know, everybody's talking about it. Now, that uncertainty isn't just at dinner parties, it's also manifesting in the boardroom. Organizations are like, what's going to happen? And there is a large amount of uncertainty. Now, you would think, and this is the irony, that the uncertainty of AI would highlight the importance and the value of something like agile approaches and things like Scrum. But actually, it's sort of like, well, we're not sure, so we're not going to do anything. We're going to do some pilots. We're going to roll out ChatGPT or Gemini or something to everybody's desktop. And yeah, that's what we're going to do. So the word, I should say three, sorry. So the world is sort of changing. The environment for agile transformation has certainly gone through a major change, whether it because of economic uncertainty, whether it's because of large consulting firms moving on to the next big thing, or whether it's because ultimately a lot of people have done agile and have been trained and the like. So that really brings up three main themes for today's talk that I want to spend a little bit of time with you, that I'm going to talk about with respect to the future of Scrum. Learning Scrum, which has become a fundamental sort of routine ceremony thing that organizations have been going through, and that is changing. I'm going to share some of that, particularly some insights that we see at scrum.org. Enterprise agility, the reality that scaled agile framework and other approaches to scaling have not really had the success that you would hope they would have. Now, I've got nothing against any of these scaling approaches. However, I think that we need to change the paradigm to really think about scaling differently. And AI is going to have an impact. I think it should be actually the most important fundamental impact for generating an environment for Scrum and Agile approaches to succeed in enterprises, but it's going to create some uncertainty and FUD for a while. So let's start and talk a little about learning Scrum. Who wouldn't want to learn Scrum? I'm sure many of you have sat through a 2-day Scrum Master class, or maybe you've attended something online. So a lot of people have learned Scrum. Well over 2 million for just Scrum Alliance and Scrum.org have been trained in Scrum over the last 15, 16 years. Here's some data from Scrum.org's perspective. So we have 1.1, almost 1.2 million cert holders. The predominant, 80% of those are PSM1 holders. We continue to get 1.2 million people to the website every month to look at resources around Scrum. We have 350-ish licensed trainers, of which some of them are in Turkey. We work in 52 countries and have 201 partners. So Scrum is dead, apparently, if you believe LinkedIn. However, you see that there's still a vibrant community of cert holders, as millions of people still seeking expertise and help to do Scrum every day. And of course, there's still a significant ecosystem around partners and the like. Scrum lives in the context of digital change. Most organizations have adopted Scrum and Agile in the area of digital change, often around in the area of software delivery and development. Now, as an economist that I like, whose name is Khalida Perez, she's a Venezuelan, but she works at the London School of Economics in London. And she believes that all technology, digital, the microprocessor, etc., goes through 4 phases. And she would argue that the digital age, which started in 1971 in California when the microprocessor was created, is now in its 4th phase of adoption. And that means that there's a certain change around maturity and market saturation. Scrum is now a commodity for most education providers. It's become a sort of thing that people learn at university. We have a university program that has well over 100 universities using our materials and certification. So we've seen that we're at that phase of the life cycle of Scrum. That has some massive implications to the way in which education is done and to how adoption is perceived. You know, we're even on TV shows, right? This is a US TV show called Silicon Valley, and they used a Kanban board and talked about Scrum in an episode. So parody is perhaps illustrative of the maturity of the Scrum market. When we look at the website traffic, those 1.2 million people that are coming every month, what we see is that the most popular site, the content is what is Scrum and introduction type Scrum content, which is shocking. However, we do see from cert holders in particular that there's a greater thirst for additional skills. So if you see only 3% of growth in sort of like the core, meaning the sort of PSM, PSPO, and we're seeing 50% growth in the non-core. So it's interesting. What we're still seeing is a lot of people that Agile and Scrum is new to them, even though we're in a commoditized market. And we're seeing the people where it isn't new, I've got a thirst for growing and extending that knowledge. And when you look at who is learning today, you know, it's still core is IT professionals, software development, project management, product management, and marketing. Industry-wise, we see, you know, independent software vendors, pharmaceutical, government, consumer packaged goods is growing massively. Finance continues to be a huge industrial and aerospace and defense, in particular in the industrial segment, continue. However, when you grab these people, ultimately it's about digital knowledge work. And we continue to see Scrum being applied in the context of knowledge work. Now, the reason why I said earlier that I think AI is potentially the biggest opportunity that Scrum has seen for that since the microprocessor and since software development and object-oriented software development in particular. And the reason why I think that's true is that I think all digital knowledge workers, all people that are working in that space, with the advent of AI, are going to have a greater opportunity to improve their work by the application of AI. So that basically means that you're going to see call center teams, you're going to see, you know, sort of like support teams suddenly taking over their business processes in a lot more an aggressive way, utilizing AI to provide the development work around that. An interesting change has happened to our website. So if in 2020, the age of people that attended our website, that came to our website, was 35 and older, the average age. We had younger people, we had much older people, but the mean, you know, the distribution was very much 35 and older. If I was going to guess how old somebody was, I'd say you're over 35 if you're on our website. Now, suddenly that changed actually in 2023 and has continued, that trend has continued where actually it's under 35. And what that means is that the way in which they learn has changed. Fundamentally, their desire to learn has changed. And how they learn is different. I don't know if you've got children at home. I'm fortunate to have two. And I was watching my son, he was on his games PC last night, and he was working out how he could live stream his game to his buddy. And so he was on YouTube, and he had YouTube on his phone, and he had his computer, and he was doing that. I'm like, wow, it was very just in time, put it that way. So it's interesting that we're seeing this change to online self-paced learning, and that definitely is something that we're seeing. And obviously, introduction to Scrum has become a commodity. Universities are teaching Scrum, and that has an impact on Agile because Scrum training, love it or hate it, was a revenue source that the community, that the Agile change agents relied on to allow them the flexibility to then do other things around this industry. So that means there's going to be something different that happens in the way in which Agile is adopted. The other thing that's interesting is over the last 5 years, we've seen a lot of pushback against this, and it was never meant to be. The idea that in 2 days you can become a master of something. Unfortunately, the head of HR, the head of learning and development, and dare I say the organization as a whole bought into this. And therefore, when it took longer to adopt Agile, it was considered to be a bit of a failing. And when organizations have tried to adopt more nuanced growth development stuff, leadership development around agility, there's often been pushback from L&D or like, well, no, you just learn those skills in a 2-day class and you're done. So investment in professional development has definitely limited, which worries me greatly because on one hand, we have a thirst for improving knowledge and getting better after that initial learning. And we see a young community coming through that are adopting online learning and self-paced. So how do we help them get better at their craft? How do we really develop that? And I don't know, because one thing that I've seen a lot that's very challenging in organizations is a lot of organizations adopt Scrum, many of the companies you're working at. So a very simple 2x2 I put up on the wall when I'm talking to those organizations. There's there's many things I'm interested in, but if I'm going to only be allowed to be interested in 2 things, I focus on 2 things: empowered ownership and product orientation. When I'm talking about empowered ownership, I'm thinking about the ability to make decisions rapidly, the ability to, to actually deliver continuously. When we talk about product ownership, I mean clear boundaries, clear, limited dependencies, a clear understanding of value, access to stakeholders. If you combine those 2 things, those 2 dimensions fundamentally describe for me the essence of what Scrum is. You need to be empowered. You need to have an empowered team that's using an empirical process that's continuously improving in pursuit of a clear goal and a clear boundary with access to stakeholders. Now, I compiled this from our trainer meets last year. I put this on the wall and I said, hey, tell me about your customers. Generally, if you were going to say where your customers sit on this, put this dot, and I put this together. And you see that for most organizations, though they've adopted Agile and Scrum, the reality is they're still in a very project-oriented approach. Yes, you get some outliers, usually smaller organizations or parts of larger organizations. And you get, if the top left tends to be the crisis projects that are empowering, but they're still a project. Maybe there's a big disaster that's happened. Bottom right tends to be large government programs where you see heavy project management. Great examples obviously are the Boeing space program, which was very much like this, where SpaceX is probably top right, and you understand the success that SpaceX had versus Boeing. So the future of learning is interesting because ultimately commoditized content throughout, people still seem to believe you can become a Scrum Master with a 2-day class because of our industry. And that nuanced learning, there's a thirst for it, extending the skills, understanding how to apply the ideas of agility at a more scaled or a more complex environment. However, there's not as much support because ultimately in terms of jobs to be done, we're still in that bottom quadrant. So, which has an impact. And of course, the business model for many Agile coaches is fundamentally changing, which makes them change how they're actually executing. So let's lean in a little bit about enterprise agility though. So that bottom left, can we start moving organizations into that top right? Is it possible to do that? So Scrum isn't that hard at the end of the day. I recently introduced Scrum to my kids' school because they had a project, and I know it's a project still, but I'm trying to encourage them to change their orientation as well. That's another longer story, but my kids both my children have language-based learning disabilities. They have dyslexia, and so this school is a very special school, and they want to change the way they do parent-teacher conferences. They're very data rich, they're very empirical. You know, they build plans for each child, and the conference process was incredibly painful. So they wanted to change it, and the head of school said, Dave, you know how to help organizations adopt stuff. So we've actually introduced a product inside the organization called Parent-Teacher Conferences. It's got an owner. We invest X amount per year. It has a clear bounded problem space that helps AI enormously. And we're reinventing parent-teacher conferences incrementally with a very clear goal. Our North Star is to reduce 80% of the work for teachers in actually preparing for that conference, because at the moment, per student, a teacher takes between 5 and 10 hours per student to prepare for that conference. And that 5 to 10 hours could be much better spent teaching or building new syllabus, or even at home having a cup of tea. Anyway, so when I introduced Scrum to these people, it was incredible. They were like, these are teachers, super smart, super able, very motivated, very mission driven, never seen Scrum. It was very clear that it fitted. They were like, oh yeah, this makes sense. It's pretty simple, right? Have a clearly defined problem. We knew exactly what our problem is with parent-teacher conferences. We had a bound problem because we decided what parent-teacher conference was. We'd created it as a product. An acceptance that things will change, and an empowered team. We knew we couldn't deliver for the conferences, the Getting to Know You conference, which is now. We're focused on November as our next release, and then the March conference after that, and then the June conference. So, you know, if those things are in place, it's relatively easy. Empowered, clear side to the problem, and an acceptance that continuous improvement is a natural thing for both the product and how the team work. And it's easy in small companies. It's easy in innovation situations. It's easy in crisis situations. It's easy when you've got a very clear product in mind. But the reality of most enterprises is that business and technology is disconnected. And the clear line of sight with respect to the problem that's being solved, access to stakeholders, an agreement actually what good looks like, measurable outcomes agreed to, not conflicting priorities, not conflicting objectives, not uncomfortably hard measures. The reality is that most business and technology is deeply disconnected, and it's very worrying. That most organizations are bureaucratic. It's somewhere where people go when they're not at home. That's not that people don't care. I think most people do care about the work that they're doing. However, because of many reasons, particularly around risk, around status, authority, power, bureaucracy and hierarchy are a natural norm in most organizations, and that stifles this ability to have a clear path to success. Decision making is elongated and slow. And most companies don't want to make decisions. They say they do. So the way they do that, though, is they have 20 people in the room all making a decision rather than one person. They're very risk averse. You get fired for making mistakes. You might get promoted if you are successful. We all know success is hard, growth is hard. So I think I'm just going to focus on the mistakes. So it's very worrying. And most organizations are still doing water scrum fall. This was something that I identified when I was running the app dev practice at Forrester Research, covering Agile. And what I found was every organization said they were doing Scrum, but they only, their planning was done annually, big planning. They did Scrum and they didn't release very frequently. So it was water, Scrum, fall, which was very, very disappointing. But this is the new norm, right? We just talked about this earlier. The world that we live in requires us, particularly in this world of President Trump and this, two wars going on, the AI happening. It's just, we just know climate change. We know that the world is going to be continuously changing, right? So this is the new norm. So we need to start building organizations that are effective in this. And we know how to be effective. Not just Scrum's, not just shouting about this. You've got Eric Ries and Stephen Blank talking about it in Lean Startup. You've got obviously this big D-School design thinking group out of Stanford and the like, talking about it in terms of ideation and how to manage complexity and how to create empathy and understand problem spaces and build stakeholder agreement and alignment. You know how to do all this stuff in the face of complexity. And these are just three things. You've also got, Knefan from people like Dave Snowden, who definitely know what to do, even if they will tell you you're an idiot numerous times during that process, which is probably true as well. You've got so much knowledge that we know how to fix it, but that is not, because it doesn't that. So when will the new norm start affecting how organizations are organized? I just don't know. Without this change, without organizations accepting that they need to work in an empirical way, they need to empower teams, and they need to be continuously improving, and they need to align to outcomes and have a clear boundary around problems, and those teams solving problems can't get too big. Until they accept that, we're always going to be in trouble. So there is something that's starting to emerge that I think there's some value to, which is product thinking, and the application of a product operating model, or what I would say an agile product model, operating model. So maybe some of you have met my friend Mick Kirsten's book, Project to Product. But ultimately, what we're talking about is changing the way in which the unit of currency that we use to manage the development of value in our digital capabilities. And we do that with some of these things. I'm not going to go for those things. The last thing you want to hear me is talk. But ultimately, it's about changing from a predictive approach with a temporary life cycle where the work is more important than the outcomes, to something that's all about outcomes, that's all about flexibility, that's all about stable focus on that, not the actual things that we're delivering. They can change, but that sort of focus, that mission that we're on. And that tends to focus on three things: mindset, alignment, investment. Perhaps the most important one is actually investment. So adopting a mindset, thinking about a bound problem, applying product thinking, stakeholders, value, ROI, etc., aligning your organization to that, and then investing in that. So changing the way in which you fund teams and teams of teams in pursuit of a long-term product strategy. They're the three things that organizations are starting to think a little bit more effectively about. And maybe, again, AI might be the catalyst for this. You need to approach, the situation with a view to stakeholders, users, outcomes, dependencies, ownership, and value. How many times have you worked on a project to build a piece of software or product that ultimately, when the project ends, you then move on to something else, and that project, that thing is still living there? I was talking to a lady at the Natural History Museum in the Netherlands, and she was saying, we have built some amazing digital products. We do not maintain them, and we move on to the next one, and they live there, and then they slowly disappear. So having that mindset of longevity, having that mindset of value and access to stakeholders. Now, these things will change, but ultimately having that perspective is important. Aligning your organization to that, and then investing. And I would argue that the most important single thing that we can fix is our investment approach, our portfolio planning approach, the way in which we fund teams and teams of teams. You start there with a more holistic product-centric approach, investing in the value that product provides, not the work that needs to be done on it. You really do change everything. And unfortunately, most people that adopted SAFe their lean portfolio planning maybe was an attempt to do that. However, the adoption has really taken existing project-based approaches and implemented new names over the top of that. So you may have seen me present a lot about this thing called Agile Product Operating Model, which really is all about providing an operating model and a transition approach to that operating model for a product-centric organization. And it talks about these elements: strategy, people, structure, and value cycle. And it really highlights the importance of uniqueness, holistic, empowered teams built to change, complete, empirical, and evidence-based. And it helps you manage that change. So when we look at the future of Scrum, I don't think Scrum necessarily needs to change, but the environments that Scrum operate with do. Now, some would argue that we need to change Scrum to make it more product-centric. It's pretty product-centric. We need to add a lot more product thinking into it. I'm not sure that that would actually benefit. I actually think we need to change the environment that Scrum fits in, and then we'll have a look at if Scrum needs to change. So we talked a little bit about, you know, the Agile is dead sort of mantra and Scrum adoption since 2023 and how that's continuing to plague the industry. And I highlighted that learning and the Scrum industrial machine is going to change because of that, but also because the average age of people that are doing Scrum now is dropping and they expect something different. Now, they need to be working in an environment that makes Scrum successful. And that unfortunately isn't most of the environments that I see out there. And so organizations now are starting to think about, how do I think of my digital capabilities as a series of products? And those products have clear boundary, et cetera, et cetera. But there is another potential, I was going to say monkey wrench, that could be thrown into the engine, and that is AI. So change is coming. As simple as that. TCS has laid off 12,000 people. Microsoft has laid off 15,000 people. Autodesk has laid off 1,350 people. CrowdStrike, 5% reduction. The average age of employment, so 13% reduction in employees for workers aged 20 to 25 in the US. Wow. It's kind of scary, isn't it? And when you look at all of the press releases around these things, AI is part of that story. So I picked just two people. Everybody seems to be an AI expert, and I don't consider myself to be an AI expert. However, I have talked to a lot of organizations and people that are using AI with Scrum, and our community, the professional Scrum trainer community, is very into using AI at the moment, maybe a little too much some days. I also have been fortunate enough to spend a bit of time talking to some of the organizations producing AI, primarily just to talk about how, in particular, software development is going to change. And Microsoft is one organization that I've spent some time with. So I picked, you know, Jeff Sutherland's comment here, you know, the co-creator of Scrum, a friend of mine. He thinks that AI ultimately will allow Scrum teams to be 30 to 100 times more productive. I don't know if that's true. However, what I am seeing increasingly by the organizations that are using it, including my own teams, I have a cross-functional team that maintains our platform. We call it the platform infrastructure, you know, the ability to buy certs, the ability to go to book training classes, buy online learning, you know, all that stuff. And they use AI extensively now. And yes, it's given us the ability to scale that capability significantly and do a lot more. So I do know that's true. I don't know if it's 30 or 100 times more effective. I think the constraint that we see ourselves is maybe our own imagination. You know, there's only so much change that we can absorb from our own needs with respect to the platform, which is interesting. Kent Beck, you know, the godfather of user stories, etc., says, he expects to see it helping product owners in particular and Scrum teams really be a lot more empirical, because it will help us set the right goals, and really that project management overhead that the team often has to manage will be removed. So I think we all can accept one simple truth, that augmentation, AI will ultimately extend the capability of product delivery. So we've now got organizations that are aligned around product, let's hope, with the Agile product operating model. And now we can fuse in AI into these teams and teams of teams to effectively extend that capability. So what will the impact on the teams be? And is Scrum still useful? Two very relevant questions. So will we have product teams? So I asked Gemini, which is always good. And basically that I cut and pasted that. AI is not a replacement. I'm not sure if she had her fingers crossed, but a catalyst for its evolution. Most successful organizations that invest in upskilling their employees to work alongside AI, leveraging the power to become productive, creative, and innovative. Products today will continue to have users and stakeholders that are human. Empathy, emotional intelligence is crucial for negotiating with stakeholders and delivering value. Everybody wants stuff. The stuff they want often wrong. You need to help them, and AI ain't going to do that. Products execute on business strategy requires choice. So product ownership is incredibly important. Nuanced judgment calls on what quality really is and critical thinking. You need to have these skills in place to be able to effectively take advantage of it. You might build more stuff, but building the right stuff still requires us to have product teams rather than individuals using AI to deliver product value. So is Scrum still relevant? I think three things. Scrum, if you ask me what Scrum is, I think it's three things. Empirical process control. We all know that the only way to use the black box that is AI is to try stuff, to inspect and adapt and ensure quality and value. AI is a quality control problem, not a development problem. So empiricism seems to be the right thing, right? Empowered teams. One of the biggest criticisms at Scrum is we haven't got all the right skills in our team to build a fully deliverable increment, an increment that actually delivers value. Well, actually, maybe we do now. Maybe AI is that secret sauce. That's what Craig Larman and Jeff Sutherland in their presentations about AI spend a lot of time talking about. And I think they're right. I know that, for instance, we were delivering a new thing that required a legal document to license people on it. We have many legal documents already. We have a lawyer who's very expensive, but don't tell her. And so I was like, oh, well, I know whenever you engage a lawyer, it's very back and forth. So instead of engaging her with an open sheet of paper, I took our existing legal documents. I described the business process of the thing that we're doing. I described almost a user story to describe how it worked and some other artifacts. I brought that together. And then I said to AI, build me a contract for this actor, for this stakeholder. And it did. I then gave that contract to my counsel. She then reviewed it, much quicker, much more effective. And interestingly, I shared the same context with her, the human being, and that really helped. So it shows you that, empowered teams can actually deliver. And continuous improvement. There's absolutely no way AI should just be you do it once and then you're done, even if the prompt gives you the solution or the information. Particularly in working systems, when you're deploying AI to solve problems that are continuously happening and you're delivering capabilities in that way, you're always going to be improving. The model's always going to be changing. There's always going to be changes. So the things that make Scrum really relevant still seem to work in this age of AI. In fact, though the teams might be smaller, in fact, Scrum's even more relevant because it's not just software developers that are going to be using Scrum or even marketing professionals. It could potentially be any knowledge worker that's utilizing AI. So you're going to see augmented product ownership. Product ownership's a really hard job. I know I am one at the moment, and I'm finding it very challenging, particularly in a down market when you've got lots of stakeholders who have very strong opinions. What it really does, what I use AI for, is rapidly scaling product management. The ability to quickly create prototypes, the ability to do competitive analysis, the ability to look at vision statements and ask if there's something missing. I used it to help me generate personas. I use it always to minute take. And then what I do at the end of the week, usually on a Friday, is I summarize the particularly certain meetings. I bring them together into one folder around that product, and then I use summaries to help me bring it to that next level. The other thing it's really good at is presenting information. As a PO, I spend a lot of time telling people the same thing. I can create really high-end cartoons and things, so even fun presentations, to deliver my message in a more interesting way. So hopefully that frees up some of my time. Well, it does free up some of my time to do other stuff. Now, what you choose to do in that free time is your choice. I'm not always good. I tend to read a lot about AI at the moment, which sort of defeats the whole purpose. We also have the augmented Scrum Master. Many teams utilize incorrectly Scrum to become that team executive assistant, minuting all the meetings, organizing all the meetings. Maybe now AI can do that, which allows the Scrum Master to do the things that a Scrum Master's really focused on, which is ensuring that the team is effectively delivering every increment, ensuring that there's no things in the way, impediments, making sure that it flows effectively, helping the product owner become more empirical and utilize Scrum to their advantage, and then helping the organization, helping that product operating model adopt Scrum in a more scalable way. Let's hope it's freeing up some time. Maybe all of this is talking about scaling Scrum without scaling Scrum. So it's a huge opportunity for Scrum teams to scale their efforts without breaking team size or number of teams limits. We found with Nexus, 10 teams working together was way the limit. We also found that 7 people in a team is way the limit. But most organizations break that instantly. Maybe we have the opportunity now not to. But we have to embrace it. We have to experiment. We have to learn. We have to think about model management, prompt management, content engineering, context engineering, and of course, governance engineering to make sure that we're effectively using it. I know that the Scrum teams that don't take advantage of Agile, AI will not be as relevant in the future. Okay, so the future is pretty exciting. We're going to be learning Scrum in new and different ways, and there's a whole new generation of people that are like, oh, this is interesting, but they don't want to attend a 2-day Scrum Masterclass. We've got perhaps some glimmer of light about a different paradigm to fundamentally change our digital portfolio to effectively employ agility at scale. And AI is going to make us smarter, faster, and better at picking our fantasy football team, I hope. Though the jury's still out. Apparently, AI isn't quite as good as we would hope. That's the trouble, isn't it? So it's definitely going to scale us, and it's definitely going to help us be more effective. So does the Scrum Guide need to change? Maybe you've seen some presentations that talk about the future of the Scrum Guide. Not at the moment. It's a very simple foundational set of ideas that have not really changed. Maybe it does need to be refreshed at some point, but instead of worrying about the guide and its very simple ideas, let's focus on delivering value, exploring AI to share practices, looking at ideas around product to effectively deliver more value to our customers, and share Scrum with more and more people. I know I took Scrum into my kids' school and found it was a complete revelation. I'm hoping that we can scale the product model across the school in the next few years. It's a shame I have a day job because it's super interesting. And maybe we do have a problem with Agile. No, actually, maybe we have a problem in the marketing of Agile. The ideas of agility still hold true, and nobody's ever been able to provide any alternative. So when somebody says Agile is dead, say, fair enough, you're probably right. It's not cool anymore, is it? You know, say, okay, so what is the future? And you know what they're going to describe? Agile, but with different words. That's the first rule of every revolution, right? Consulting firms need the next big thing. That's just an economic reality. We have to maybe change some of our dogma so that we can connect to those new things and take advantage of all that investment that we made in Agile and that our customers have made in Agile to take it to that next level. Maybe that's product thinking, maybe that's AI augmented teams. Unfortunately, organizations don't like change. People, power, status win every time. And we should never just be about Agile. We should always be about outcomes. And that's what I've hopefully talked about all day. So, I was a little bit over. So I think we've got a little bit of time, like 8 minutes for some questions. Hopefully this was interesting. Hopefully it was a little entertaining and kept you awake on this late hour in Turkey.
Thank you very
Dincer.
much. Thank you very much for your valuable insights. It was too much realistic than I have supposed to see. It was great to hear that from you, especially from the CEO of the Scrum.org. We have only one question now from the chat session. Let me read it. Here is Ali Yusuf Koçkan, and he is 22 years old. And he creates content about finance and technology, I think in YouTube. In the future, I want to bring innovative tech startups from Japan and AI developments from Europe and United States to Turkey and make major investments. I choose these countries based on my own observations. What would you recommend for me? Are there other countries you think I should focus on? How should I take my first step to achieve this goal? Also, since I create finance and AI, generative AI content on YouTube, could you suggest topics about AI that would engage my audience? Actually, Ali Yusuf is an entrepreneur, a young entrepreneur, I think, and he wants, yes.
Yeah, so there's a few things. I mean, I'm no expert on all the things that you're asking about because fintech, etc. No idea. However, one thing I would suggest is the Stephen Blank and the Startup Owner, 3 Steps to the Epiphany is his first book, really badly written, but Startup Owner's Manual is perhaps the best sort of blueprint. I was going to say operating system for entrepreneurs, but it's really a blueprint that you then build your operating system from. A really valuable set of ideas and techniques. With respect to the AI question, I've seen the most interesting uses of AI, the most interesting companies that are doing AI still are predominantly, and we're very West oriented here. So in Europe, if you were looking at industrial, Germany's got some fantastic application of AI in industrial context. Financial services, the United Kingdom and Ireland are doing some really interesting things. And of course, you know, the US, particularly Jersey City, just outside New York, because they can't afford to live in New York. There's some really cool stuff happening there as well. But what I always focus on, rather than, you know, looking at all these, I try to find problems to solve. AI is that awesome, but it's not a solution unto itself. Remember to find problems. And Stephen Blank's work provides you with a framework or an approach that can really help do that. It's like the Lean Startup book, but actually a practical guide. because he was the professor that Eric Ries went to, and he learned Lean Startup from, and then wrote the book from it. So I'd recommend Stephen Blank's work if I was going to encourage any entrepreneur to look, for an approach. And yes, Scrum is a part of that, obviously.
That's great. Thank you. And we have one more from Selim Kurt. AI-driven benchmarking and simulation could trigger constant macro-organ optimizations. At what point does continuous improvement create cognitive overload and decision fatigue for teams? Should Scrum explicitly define limits to improvement cycles to preserve focus and creativity?
Well, that's funny you should say that. That's the reason why we have sprints, right?
Yeah.
Ultimately, that delimits and as a sprint goal. And though we removed the need for every sprint to have a process improvement, that was removed in 2020 in the Scrum Guide update. Sorry, the 2020 Scrum Guide update. They removed that. I'd still encourage it. People say we don't need sprints anymore. We're working in AI. It's continuous flow of value. My experience is that stakeholders in particular get overloaded with change. So we have the same problem with our platform that we build, which we use, which everything runs on at scrum.org. What we find is that it's important still to have that 2-week cadence, and the stakeholders, we use a 2-week sprint, and get together the stakeholders where we look at what we're doing and what we're going to do next. And we find that controls the flow. It sort of like manages the tap. Because you're totally right. It's a continuous flow of opportunity, but that structure can really help to manage it. And then you prioritize value, right? So you focus on the most important things. That's a great question, Sam.
Yeah. Thank you very much. And I and Emre, my colleague from Projera, have the same questions. In the past failed Scrum transformations, do you believe the root cause was more than mimicking processes or about setting up structures without embracing product thinking?
I mean, it depends. I don't know what in your particular situations why Scrum failed, but my experience is that ultimately the lack of clear sight of a problem, meaning product thinking, and the access to those people, stakeholders, to effectively validate thinking along the way, and frequent access gets in the way. And there's a hierarchical element around who's in control, who's making the decisions, and that ultimately often undermines Scrum adoption, because a Scrum team, it's not rocket science. You just focus on the problem, empower the team, and give them the support. Scrum Master's job is to make things transparent. Product Owner's job is to prioritize the list, focus on the things that are most valuable, and then get out of their way. And you'll realize quite quickly the impediments that are getting in the way of them. And then your job as leaders is to remove those. Now, what most leaders would see when something got in their way is that it's a reflection on them. Oh my God, something's gone wrong. So we can't allow that. So we don't want to see those impediments because it says my department's bad, or my approach is bad. So that then undermines the whole process. So that's what I see over and over again. So I'm hoping that if we could realign to products, if we could invest in that way, and then people could accept that the ownership of that product and the empowered team decision-making process around that product's in place, then I think we'll go a long way to solving many of those problems. However, experience would indicate that it's very hard to make a change for no reason. And there has to be a catalyst for that change, whether that's AI, whether that's a market change, whether that's some laying off 30%, 40% of the workforce. You will need something like that to really give you the smoke cover, to drive that change into your organization.
Thank you very much, Dave. We have run out our time. We have a couple of questions. Maybe we will send you.
No worries, please do.
Ask for your help, for your guidance for that questions. Thank you for joining us today. It was very valuable, Dave. We hope to see you in Istanbul, Turkey again.
I hope so. I hope so too. And thank you for taking the time in your evening for the people that have done that to watch this presentation. Stay in touch on LinkedIn. Please connect to me. And if you've got any questions or comments, you can always reach out on that medium. Okay?
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thanks, everybody. Ciao. Bye-bye.